The peace movement has, for all its long history, been dreaming of having a universal body, a body for arbitration, a body to help us solve conflicts by nonviolent means, by dialogue, by negotiation, by international law. Mikael Møller, we are exceptionally happy that you had the possibility to be with us today. So welcome on stage.
Thank you very much, Ms. Breiners. Mr. Brown, Rector, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Any conference that starts with songs by Arya is already a success. So it takes off a little bit of the pressure on the rest of us. Closer? Okay. Thank you for your invitation to this very important and timely Congress, Disarm Climate for Peace. And I'm particularly grateful to the International Peace Bureau for bringing much needed attention to the different aspects of this topic in the coming 2 days, looking at both the issues at stake and at possible solutions. The International Peace Bureau has an impressive history of 125 years. The IPB is a true pioneer. It was the first organization dedicated to peace. It also advocated actively for the establishment of the League of Nations, the predecessor of the United Nations, whose office in Geneva I have the privilege to lead. Disarmament and development are two of the main clusters the international organizations and other actors in Geneva cover. But before discussing the relationship between these two main issues, allow me to make some general comments about the governance challenges the world is facing and how our roadmap for the future can help us overcome the current fragmentation and difficulties. We live in a world of unparalleled challenges right now. Inequalities in income and opportunities are on the rise worldwide. Confidence in the institutions that were set up to govern for the benefit of us all decreases dramatically. Trust in accountability mechanisms and justice is falling. In short, we face a widespread trust deficit in the authorities across all levels of our societies. This trust deficit is also on the rise in international relations. The rule of law is not applied equally to small and big, to friend and foe. Populist and protest movements are on the rise as citizens look for alternative ways of making their concerns heard and promoting solutions. Power structures are being recalibrated and shifted. The aging Westphalian state system is being challenged. Civil society, the private sector, mayors and cities, where 75% of the world population will live by 2050, continue to play a more significant role at local, national, regional, and international levels. We as individuals are also influencing societal decisions much more than in the past, and will do so more in the future. With access to technology and more people educated than ever before, empowered individuals hold governments and institutions at all levels to account. In addition, today's challenges are becoming more complex and can no longer be seen in isolation and labeled either as security or health or environment. And in response to this multifaceted reality, several historic policy frameworks were adopted by all UN member states last year to guide the work of our countries for the coming 15 years and beyond. I'm of course speaking about the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, and the Addis Ababa Action Agenda for Financing for Development. Combined, and when you add the issues of human rights and gender to these, they form a roadmap for humanity, a roadmap for the future, that invites us to look at security and development challenges in a much more integrated manner. In a unique new way, It brings together the three pillars on which the United Nations is founded: peace, development, and human rights. As has been reconfirmed time and again by the UN's work over the past 70 years, there can be no development without peace, and no peace without development, and there can be neither without human rights. As we move to implement this ambitious agenda, world military expenditure is on the increase, totaling almost $1.7 trillion in 2015. That is more than at the end of the Cold War. And the established disarmament machinery has stalled. In addition, we are confronted with new security challenges through autonomous weapon systems or killer robots, and through terrorism, criminal networks, and armed flows that cut across borders, challenging the traditional distinction between interstate and intrastate conflicts. We need to bring the disarmament machinery into the 21st century, restarted and prepared to respond to new challenges of our time. Important achievements in the past have proven that disarmament negotiations are possible and can indeed yield significant results. In Geneva, for example, a number of key multilateral disarmament agreements were successfully negotiated under the auspices of the Conference on Disarmament that I happen to be the Secretary General of, including the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, the Chemical and Biological Weapons Conventions, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and others. The adoption of the Arms Trade Treaty last year is another example that demonstrates how the disarmament machinery can deliver if the political will is there. In contrast, the Conference on Disarmament, which I just mentioned, has unfortunately not been able to adopt even a program of work for the last 20 years. It is understandable that our member states look at other fora to address today's challenges if the Conference on Disarmament, which is supposed to be the primary place for negotiation, continues to be blocked for a variety of reasons that I believe can be solved with true engagement and commitment. I continue to believe that with the shared political will of its members, this Conference on Disarmament can regain momentum. Although there is no consensus on starting negotiations on any of the CD's core agenda items, particularly the nuclear file, there are areas of agreement that could provide a starting point for member states to negotiate framework conventions or voluntary instruments, especially on some of the non-nuclear issues that need urgent attention. Some immediate action is, for example, urgently needed in the field of autonomous weapons that I just mentioned, to regulate their use before it's too late, as technology is developing very quickly in this field. In this context, let me welcome Germany's leadership in addressing these challenges within the framework of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, and I urge the international community to move forward in regulating these types of weapons before it's too late. In addition, a review of the working methods and composition of the Conference on Disarmament would provide an opportunity to build on some of the best practices that have emerged elsewhere. At present, for example, civil society actors do not have direct formal access to the Conference on Disarmament. In my view, that is completely unacceptable. Civil society actors can and do play their part in breaking the CD's lengthy impasse. The energy and vision they bring to the debate can mobilize political will towards finding a solution and help re-energize intergovernmental processes. To bring them into the debate and highlight their added value, I have organized 2 informal CD civil society fora in the last 2 years, which turned out to be quite successful and were welcomed both by member states and civil society, and clearly showed that there is substantive value of closer interaction. The persistent paralysis in the multilateral disarmament diplomacy and growing awareness of the devastating humanitarian impact of the use of nuclear weapons has prompted states to seek alternative pathways forward, one of them being the open-ended working group this summer in Geneva. Its report from last month recommends the convening of a conference in 2017 to negotiate a legally binding instrument to prohibit nuclear weapons. As we speak, the first committee of the General Assembly is opening its session, and the report of this working group will be one of its main agenda items. And I look forward with interest and some trepidation to see what the outcome of this discussion will be. Ultimately, a new, reinvigorated disarmament process could help free the necessary resources to focus our attention on urgent development needs, concentrating on the prevention of conflicts. A comprehensive preventive strategy is obviously the best way forward for a more secure and prosperous humanity and planet. Ladies and gentlemen, our roadmap for the future provides us with an opportunity to move from talking about prevention to acting preventively. It is a collective blueprint for action guided by a new mindset and a new working culture. Horizontal collaboration across issues and silos needs to become the new normal, and we need to continue to push for it, both within states as well as internationally between different organizations. Business as usual is no longer possible. And we cannot address tomorrow's problems and tomorrow's challenges with yesterday's tools. For a successful implementation of this roadmap, all of us, including the private and public sectors, parliaments, academia, civil society, and other stakeholders, will need to work together in a much more integrated and collaborative way. This is what this roadmap for the future and its 17 goals with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development with its 70 goals as the envelope is intending us all to do. To think much more about and act on the connection between issues and between partners. Bearing in mind that poverty is often a catalyst for conflict and violence within and among states, it is no surprise that Sustainable Development Goal number 1 is on extreme poverty and urges its eradication in all parts of the world, including here in Europe. Focusing our actions on the implementation of our collective roadmap on this and goals such as education, health, gender, or environment will address major conflict catalysts and preventively pave the way for a better future. It is important to highlight Sustainable Goal number 16 in this context. Through its 12 targets, SDG 16 covers a broad range of issues relevant for the promotion of a peaceful and inclusive societies, including access to justice, human rights, the effective rule of law, and good governance, as well as violence reduction, combating organized crime and corruption, and reducing illicit arms flows. It thus places considerable emphasis on both effective institutions and security for sustainable development. The new and integrated roadmap clearly tells us that effective disarmament can contribute to achieving the global goals, not only on peace and security, but also on development and human rights. The link between disarmament and development is by no means automatic. Disarmament must be accompanied by efforts to build or rebuild economic, social, and governance structures that foster political participation, social integration and equality, and that transfer resources effectively to where they're required the most. To quote the words of Secretary General, which I've seen you have taken as your motto, the world is overarmed and peace is underfunded. We need a radical shift in thinking, seeing peace, development, and human rights in a much more integrated manner. This should be the trigger of our smart investments. Just think of those $1.7 trillion in military expenditure that I mentioned in the beginning, invested in climate change mitigation and prevention, conflict resolution, social justice, human rights, and sustainable development. This amount would go a long way to help us achieve our global sustainable development agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, peace is not only the absence of war, nor is it limited to full disarmament. Peace happens every day in our daily lives, but also in the most challenging environments where people work together towards a common and unifying goal. We heard many encouraging stories just last week in something is called the Geneva Peace Talks, which brings together several absolutely extraordinary individuals from around the world to talk about how they individually work for peace. And I invite you to watch these stories online and draw some inspiration. You can look at them at peacetalks.net. And I would hope that we can use this conference also to reflect on how we can take such stories at the grassroots and scale them up to use them in our broader efforts to achieve peace for all. I thank you very much, and I wish you a really excellent event.
Thank you very much, Michael Møller, for being with us also here tonight. You have shown yourself as a true friend of civil society in Geneva, and we look forward to continued cooperation.